face these threats alone. We need collective action. And this is what makes cooperation between NATO and the EU and the wider international community essential. We do that with one very concrete purpose: to protect our freedom, your freedom, and our common world. I thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador Baiba Braji. Thank you very much. Besides being NATO official, Ambassador Braji is also coming from the Baltic countries, which means that she has the right genetic detectors for the threats coming to all of us. We're completely out of schedule, I believe, which is an excellent test that the topic is of utmost world importance. Therefore, I put the schedule in the skillful hands of Federica Mogherini. Federica, thank you very much for being with us. She was, of course, HR VP between 2014 and 2019, and today she is Director of the College of Europe. Thank you very much for being with us. Thank you, Commissioner Verhey, to being with us as well. Most welcome. First panel.
Thank you very much. You hear me well? The microphone is on? Yes, excellent. I think this should make it. Well, thank you very much. I understand that I have the challenging task of trying to say a few words. First and foremost, pass the floor to my good friend, Commissioner. And you cannot imagine how relieved I am that I am the one moderating and putting questions now and not giving answers, or trying to. And also trying to keep the time into a reasonable time framework. I understand that we'll have first a very short conversation about the costs of the lack of integration, and then we'll open the panel on the benefits of integration to the European Union with our colleagues and friends from the region. I will say only a few words to start with, and then ask the Commissioner to give us his views on the risks and the costs related to a lack of credibility or lack of progress on European integration of the region, but potentially also of other countries like Ukraine, but Georgia and Moldova too. I was just reflecting that probably I'm in the room one of the few that are coming from one of the founding member states of the European Union, I guess. And I was reflecting on the costs that would have had the lack of integration of the European Union in the very first place, some 70 years ago, in the world of today. Imagine the aggression of Russia against Ukraine today without the European Union in place. Imagine the impact that this would have had not only on Ukraine, with the lack of support and mobilization, but also on the rest of the continent. Imagine the divisions, imagine the fields that would be created, one against the other, and imagine the fragility of the continent. That would have been exactly the same fragility that we had repeated for thousands of years, where Europe was the epicenter of war rather than the epicenter of stability. And I was thinking that the same courage and the same long-term vision and determination that our founding fathers and mothers managed to find back then is probably what is required today. The cost of the lack of integration of the European Union back then would have been immense. I believed personally very strongly that the real antidote to war and the real key to reconciliation is the European integration. I tell you a little anecdote from my personal life. My grandmother, I still remember that very clearly, that had lived through the Second World War, obviously. She still was very anxious whenever she heard any German tourist speak in the streets of Rome. And it's only through the integration process of the European Union that we have become one Europe. And let me challenge the title here. I would like to rather focus on integration more than enlargement, because especially when we talk about the Balkans, I believe it's completely inappropriate to think about an enlargement. It's actually including one part of Europe that is already within our borders geographically and physically, not politically yet. This is why I think it's about reunification of Europe as much as it is when it comes to the eastern parts of Europe. I believe that we will have the opportunity to discuss more about both the costs of non-integration and the opportunities and benefits of integration in the Balkans with our friends from the region in a moment. But first I would like to pass the floor immediately to Mr. Commissioner, my good friend. We're working together in different roles when I was High Representative. We will have basically, I think, 2 rounds, one now more dedicated to you and then the other one more in conversation with the other colleagues and friends. So please, Oliver, you have the floor.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Federica. Thank you, Director Mogherini. Well, it's a bit of an oddity to talk about first the cost of non-integration. It's a very central Eastern European approach. First, we always talk about the negative before turning to the positive. Maybe this is something different, but it also highlights first the dangers. And I think if we look at the war that we are seeing around us, that directly affects us, like it or not, what we see is that vulnerabilities imminently lead to conflicts and challenges. And this is why, when you look at the Balkans in a similar way, we all know where the vulnerabilities are. We all know where the real challenges are. And when we took over the mandate, this Commission, it was a very important part of our priorities to put enlargement or integration of the Western Balkans back as part of the top 5 political priorities of the European Union. Because the war that we see in Ukraine, we have seen already in the Balkans. And we still have the aftermath. And we still have the homework to do and the lessons learned, which is a full integration of the Western Balkans into the European Union. But as importantly as that, a full integration of the Western Balkans within. Because peace and stability is best created through prosperity and not the other way around. Because once people have something to lose, they will think in a much more sober way. And I think the lesson that we have learned from all the previous years with the Western Balkans is that we have to now accelerate what we do. Accelerate in the sense that we don't only talk about the process, the institutional, if you will, the Brussels gibberish, but we talk about the real integration, the integration on the ground, how the life of the people of the Western Balkans is going to change and improve so that it will become similar or the same as the life that we are living in Europe, in the rest of Europe. And this is why when we inherited a deadlock in the negotiations with North Macedonia and Albania, we also inherited a region where the social and economic gap between the European Union and the Balkans is one of the key challenges in front of the Balkans joining the European Union, not to mention the institutional reforms that needs to be done. So with all these 3 challenges, we had to start to work very quickly. First, we deblocked the enlargement process as such through the new methodology. Because the new methodology was not only created for the candidate countries to be able to move faster and closer to the European Union, but it was also created for our internal reasons. Because I think that we got lost some of the key priorities on the way. Key priorities, why is it important for Europe to have the Western Balkans fully integrated? And I think that through the war now we start to remember. We start to remember why. And this is why the second big endeavor of ours was to speed up the economic and social convergence as fast as we can. Because through that, we can create stability in a much more credible way. So if we help the Western Balkans to move faster, to have growth and jobs locally, to keep the youth working for them, to have the latest technologies when it comes to digital or green energy, when it comes to energy security, we are providing security and stability for the entire region. And this is why we have been pushing very close and very hard for a common regional market, so that they also start to work with one another, because we still have the heritage of the wars of the Western Balkans. And of course, when in Sofia, there is still one issue that one cannot avoid discussing. And that is, when are we going to have the first intergovernmental conference? Of course, for those living in this bubble of Brussels and our procedures, this is a buzzword. But for those who are not that closely involved, I think the key is, when do we start to work on delivering membership? This is the big question when it comes to North Macedonia and Albania. And I cannot hide the fact that I'm extremely disappointed that we're still discussing this issue, because we thought that we have sorted it out 2 years ago, but now it's back on the table again. So, you know, if you have powers and you don't use it, it is also considered by others as a surrender of your powers and capabilities. So we need to trust ourselves, we need to trust our powers, and I think all member states should trust the transformative nature of the accession process. And this is the message I have been bringing to Sofia again. I was here 3 weeks ago, and I'm happy to come as frequent as necessary to get this thing off the ground and get it done in June this year. Because the war shows us that we have no time to lose. Not only time, but we have no interest to lose any more time on this. And finally, on the topic, the non-integration, I think that the COVID and the economic crisis has shown what non-integration can bring. You have seen that we have included the Western Balkans in as many initiatives that were reserved previously from member states when it came to the COVID crisis. We were very quickly deploying our financial support, be it bringing healthcare equipment, be it saving SMEs, being helping to keep the public finances stable in very challenging and never seen crises before. And we have seen how fast the Western Balkans have profited from this. If they were not there, they wouldn't be the first partners to receive vaccines from Europe. If they were in Europe, they would have received it even earlier. If they were not participating in our integration, at least remotely, then they would have had trucks and goods stopped and supply chains broken off completely. But this was not the case, because they were integrated. And I can go on with other examples. It only shows that it is not just a political project. This is an everyday project.
Thank you. Let me, if I may, let me get 2 or 3 lessons from what you said, reflecting on the mistakes that had been done in the past, in a way that we can try to avoid making mistakes today. Because I think that this is the key point. Not so much reflecting on the past, or rather using the reflection of the past to avoid making mistakes today. First, as you mentioned, I couldn't be more on your side on this, the completing the integration of the European continent is first and foremost in the interest of every single EU member state. So it's a national agenda too. Second, use the power you have. And this is true for the European institutions, the Commission, the Council, the member states, and obviously also the partner countries and the candidate countries, and those that are not candidate yet. Third, the integration, the complete integration of the European continent is indeed a peace project. And I think that in the Balkans, as well as in Ukraine, this is now self-evident, while it was not so much self-evident in the decades that we have in our recent history. It was more about democracy, rule of law, economic development and standards, which is also part of the project. But I think that here we're going back to the roots of when the European Union started, reconciliation as the key element of living together, sharing interests, as you mentioned. And last but not least, and here maybe I would invite our friends to join us, the credibility of the process. Use the power you have means that, I've always been convinced about this, there is no space for anybody to seriously compete with the European Union geostrategically in the region if the European Union is consistent. And I know that since, I would say not since I left office, but since the year before I left office, May, June 2019, the credibility of the European Union in the region has probably been shaken a bit. And I think that since then, at least now as an observer, I've seen frustration growing in the region, and I think that frustration is dangerous in this region more than anywhere else. So maybe this can be a useful forum, and sorry, I forgot to thank the organizer for having taken this initiative, because I think it is particularly important to have this, especially in Sofia, let me say. I think it is maybe a good opportunity today to understand what will be, or what could be, the costs or the risks or the dangers of lack of consistency or lack of movements, and on the other side, what could be the scenario should the process of integration in the region proceed as it should. So let me ask our colleagues and friends, ministers and vice ministers from the region to join us on stage. And if you agree, I would probably ask them first to give their reactions so that you have the concluding words. Would that be a good option? So please join us on stage. Take your time to put your...
free seating.
Here, free seating. Free seating. And please take your time to put your microphones on. And... I will again try to keep an eye on the watch, and but you know, asking an Italian to be strict on time is a bit challenging in itself, but I'll try my best. Please, excellent. We are here. That's yes. This around now. I'm not the best technician you could have, but it should be working already. Excellent. So, as you were the first putting it on, I will maybe start with you, Buyer, Minister of Foreign Affairs of North Macedonia. First of all, let me say that I'm very pleased to see you here. And my first question to you would be this, and I would ask similar questions to probably all of you, knowing that you have different perceptions from different capitals, as it is correct to have. North Macedonia has gone through major reforms, major courageous steps. I witnessed myself personally, together with, at the time, Commissioner Hahn, the signing of the Prespa Agreement. A lot of expectations, a lot of enthusiasm at the time, and I know a lot of frustration afterwards. 1 year, 5 years, 10 years from now, how do you see your country? How do you see North Macedonia? In one scenario or another, what would be the risks, the costs, the dangers of a lack of progress on the European Union path? I never say European path because you're already Europeans. And on the other side, how would you imagine your own country 1, 5, 10 years from now, should progress be made, should negotiations start? What kind of future you see?
Yeah.
And what are the steps needed today to go in the right direction?
Thank you, Federica. I'm pleased to see you as well. I'd like to thank first the organizers for inviting me and for the opportunity to be participating in this discussion with such distinguished group of panelists. And I find this title first intriguing. The EU meets Western Balkans in Sofia. How exciting, isn't it? Actually, it did happen just 4 years ago when EU met Western Balkan in Sofia during the Sofia summit, which took place 15 years after the renowned Thessaloniki summit of 2003, which established the European perspective of the Western Balkans. And you remember the atmosphere back then. The hopes were high. Sofia was taking the leadership in guiding the Western Balkans toward the European Union. But unfortunately, I was wondering how to respond to you and be different from the responses I'd been giving to you while we were meeting officially, you as a high representative and me as a deputy prime minister back then. And I don't have new things to say. The situation is status quo. North Macedonia is still waiting after 21 years since signing its Stabilization Association Council, after 15 years of gaining candidacy status and 13 consecutive positive recommendations of the Commission that we have met all necessary requirements to start the accession process. What is new is that the credibility of EU in North Macedonia has plummeted. The latest poll are showing only 8% trust of Macedonians, of people in North Macedonia in European Union. Albania is waiting as well after doing the painful reforms they underwent. The decoupling is again on the table, this time the other way around. Kosovo waiting for the visa liberalization. In Serbia, for the first time, majority of public opinion is against joining EU. Bosnia is still waiting for the candidacy status in a very difficult situation. So what has changed? Is there a strategic approach? Is there a strategic leadership of EU for the Western Balkans? I could not say at the moment. What it is new is, unfortunately, the fact that the Russian aggression in Ukraine is backing now the arguments that we've been giving and providing to you, that EU stalemates is a source of systemic vulnerability for the region. And this vulnerability is due to the open files in the region and due to the continuous Russian influence, which is hijacking this emotion of frustration, which is among our people who are overwhelmingly disappointed due to the lack of predictability and strategy ahead. But regardless, in regard to the Russian aggression in Ukraine, the region was almost unequivocal. I can talk about North Macedonia, which has joined immediately the sanctions of European Union toward Russia, but not only the newly imposed sanctions as a response to the invasion, to the aggression, but also to all restrictive measures from 2014 onwards, thus achieving 100% alignment rate with common foreign and security policies. And now there are 3 candidate countries with 100% alignment rate. Of course, Kosovo is there with the alignment rate, but because of the candidacy status, I named them the symbolic trio of 100% in the region, which requires a new approach of European Union toward the newly organized approach of the region toward European Union. We imposed, besides sanctions, provided humanitarian and other support to Ukraine, and we opened our doors for Ukrainian refugees. All these measures are being taken against the backdrop of a negative context within our region and within North Macedonia because of the ambiguity that European Union is showing toward the Western Balkans. And I believe that this is high time that Europe will take strategic leadership. You mentioned previously what would have been the situation now if there was not a European Union. I would say what would have happened if there was no strategic leadership of EU in 2004 and 2007, when EU integrated Central and Eastern European countries. Imagine EU at this point in time. Would there be unity? Would there be security in Europe? And I think that we should learn from that lesson and take that strategic leadership now, because we will have the responsibility for the next generations. I think we don't have to wait for a war to wage as it now in Ukraine, to show solidarity, to visit Kiev, and to provide a perspective for its European future. We are having a pending perspective of the Western Balkans in the last 20 years, and I think that for the sake of security and stability in the region, it's time to take strategic leadership. The future and the next generation will judge us based on the decisions we make today.
Thank you. Let me say that I witnessed with my own eyes how much North Macedonia has invested during my term in office, at least, but I can say this has continued afterwards into delivering what was on the agenda always. And let me join the Commissioner in high expectations on negotiations to start soon, as well as for Albania. We'll talk about that later. Let me now move to Kosovo. Donika, Foreign Minister of the Republic of Kosovo. Here also, I would say, there has been some frustration for sure on the visa liberalization. I will always remember when I came at that time, Commissioner Avramopoulos to announce that the decision was taken, and then again, a lack of delivery on the European Union side. In the meantime, difficult situation in the region again, and your turn to share with us your perspectives on what kind of impact could have on Kosovo and on the future of Kosovo, a lack of progress, or on the other side, consistency on the European Union path of Kosovo. Seen from Pristina.
Thank you very much. Thank you for inviting us to be part of this event. Yes, Kosovo needs to make progress in the question of visa liberalization, and that's something that should simply happen now, because there is no explanation at all. Now we have had the elections in France, and we hope for a progress in that, and we hope that all our partners and allies in the European Union will help moving forward. But visa liberalization is not the European aim of Kosovo. The European aim of Kosovo is the full membership in the European Union, and that's what we are working for. So mentioning Kosovo, different than the other Western Balkan countries on their path to the integration in the European Union, should be changed, because Kosovo will apply this year for the candidacy, we will apply for the membership, and we will see then how serious the European Union will be in addressing the facts and addressing the challenges that Kosovo has to fulfill to become partner of the European Union. But not only wanted to talk about Kosovo, I believe that the European Union should not need a war to understand the importance of not enlarging, I agree very much to you, but of integrating one part of Europe inside. And at the same time, the messages sent to the Western Balkans should be very clear. We have seen that it needs unity inside the European Union about what the member states want and what they do not want. And one of the main messages should be that no European integration without European values. and European principles. That should remain, even if we have now a war which pushes us to be more, to accelerate the processes. And yes, I agree very much that it should not sound that technical being part of the European Union, because the European Union is, before it was an economic, before it is a very successful economic project, it is a peace project and it is a political project. And the Western Balkans should be part of this political project, because it is the project that has decided one and forever that no wars anymore inside the European Union, and the Western Balkans should become part of that. Now, talking about the recent situation in Kosovo, sitting here, I just got from my Chief of Staff the information that today again there have been attacks in the northern part of our country against police. This is not the first, this is not the second, but this is now an approach from different groups who are attacking our police while they are fighting organized crime in the country. But yes, the northern part of the country is part of Kosovo as well, and the same they are doing in the northern part of the country. Some of the attacks has come from inside the Serbian territory, and this sounds for me dangerous in this situation. We are not crying, and we are not trying to make out of it something big, but the European Union, NATO, and other partners and allies should be watching very careful what's happening on the Balkans. Because the 24th of February, as it was said today so often, has changed everything. It's no more possible in the Western Balkans and not in the European Union to sit at the same time between two chairs. For our countries, it has been clear, and Kosovo has shown from day one on which side we are staying, not only improving all the sanctions that had been decided from European Union and United States, but at the same time having some different measures trying to help and to show our solidarity and admiration for the people of Ukraine. For example, in having up to 20 journalists from Ukraine not only coming and living in Kosovo, but at the same creating for them a workspace from where they can help us understand better what's happening in Ukraine, because as everybody knows, the fake news campaigns and the trolls and bots who are created in the Balkans from Russia and her proxies are invading the world, and we need to know the truth about what's happening not only in Ukraine. So Kosovo has decided on which side we stay and how strong we are committed, not only in European values, not only in becoming as soon as possible part of the European Union and NATO, but we at the same time are working very hard in fulfilling all the criteria for that. But, Mr. Commissioner, it must be clear, once the criteria are fulfilled, then the European Union should act. And that's the lack of credibility. I need to say that in Kosovo we have no frustration with the European Union. The recent polls have told that in Kosovo 93% of the people are for the European Union, and more than 90% are for becoming a full member of NATO, and that's what people expect from their government in Kosovo, and that's what we are doing every day. But it needs to change the reality, and that's why European values, European principles, fulfilling criteria, rule of law, stable economies, everything else, but then the European Union should show that they are serious in what they tell us to do, and that they are serious in having us inside as soon as possible.
Thank you. Monica. Moving slightly, but not completely out of the region, I would now ask his thoughts and reflections on past, present, and future, including some possible mistakes of the past and how to avoid them in the present and in the future, to Deputy Minister of Foreign Affairs and EU Affairs of the Republic of Turkey, Faruk, which is, by the way, also, I'm very proud of that, an alumnus of the College of Europe, of which I am director today. So good investments done where I am now. And especially, I would like to ask you a question. You know me, I've always been very outspoken, even when I was in office, so now that I'm free, even more so. Is there a time element that needs to be considered when looking at the integration process in the European Union? My impression is that the integration process is a little bit like a bicycle. Either you ride or you fall. And if there is no progress forwards, you risk to miss that moment that can then open the way for positive developments. Has there been any lesson learned on the EU-Turkey pattern there? And I guess I know the answer, but I guess that you can elaborate on that better than me. Faruk.
Yeah, thank you very much. I hope you hear me well. Yes, I cannot hear myself. Okay. First of all, I would like to thank the European Liberals and Bulgarian Liberals, as well as Atlantic Club, to organize this timely event. And also, I would like to thank them because they used the right wording, the Balkans instead of Western Balkans, which doesn't mean anything because there is no Eastern Balkans, there is no Southern or Northern Balkans. Turkey, in addition to being a candidate country, is also a Balkan country. So I am really grateful to the organizers, for using the right terminology. But I understand, why we use the terminology of Western Balkans, still to continue to discriminate against Turkey or to push Turkey away from the road where the bicycle should continue. We have the bicycle, Rector, we have the energy to run this bicycle, but the problem is our road is quite bumpy, and on the road, some artificial bumps are created, and this doesn't help. And this has been also the case, unfortunately, for Northern Macedonia and also Albania for many years. Why did we have to wait 25 years to have, Northern Macedonia, to join NATO and to start the accession negotiations? So unfortunately, the same goes for Turkey. If Turkey had been treated fairly on the accession process, I am sure today Turkey would have already been a strong member of the EU. And this would also lead to a better NATO-EU cooperation. And I think this would also create a strong deterrence in Europe against this, brutal war against Ukraine. And I always claim that if Turkey had been a member of the EU years ago, I think we could have prevented the war in Iraq, the internal war in Syria, and today the war in Ukraine would have been prevented by strong deterrence, which would be created by Turkish membership. But okay, I was, as a student of the College of Europe, I was thinking about, saying three things as, as an analytical approach. The benefits of the integration. First, stability, security, and peace. This is very important, and also as the title of this meeting clearly indicates, EU integration and EU membership is the strongest antidote to war, and this is important. And unfortunately, we have a lesson today to take. If we had integrated, some of the countries in the region, I think today, this war would not really start, because I think the other side has clearly seen the divisions within NATO, divisions within the EU, but also lack of better coordination between EU and NATO. And I think this is one of the main reasons of this war. The second benefit of the integration, of course, is, we always say democracy, better democracies, freedoms, and this is important. And for example, when we had a better accession perspective for Turkey, we made all the reforms from 1999 up to 2006. And I remember those days, the enlargement commissioner of that time, Mr. Verheugen, used to call this as a silent revolution in Turkey. And that Turkey had met the Copenhagen political criteria. But today, unfortunately, this perspective has been reduced, diminished, and this is not helping those people in Turkey who would like to push for a better democracy, for more reforms. And this is, I think, an important benefit that we have to realize. The third benefit, of course, is, social and economic welfare. We know that, European integration has helped all the countries in the, joining the EU, and it has also helped Turkey. And I remember from 1999 up to 2006, we had tripled our GDP thanks to the EU reforms that we did in order to start the accession negotiations. But again, today, this perspective has been, unfortunately reduced, and this is why, we have some, slowing down of reforms. So, of course, Turkey is too big, too poor, and Muslim, and this is, really these three issues are specific to Turkey, but we know that these 3 points will not be, liabilities. They will be assets for the EU. A big Turkey will contribute bigger, and economic Turkey, okay, today maybe our GDP is not, that much, but in 2004, Turkey's GDP was bigger than most of the candidate countries of the time. So we can do it easily, and this is not a big issue. And also having predominantly a Muslim population with a secular understanding, I think is also a big asset for the EU. If the EU really is a club of values, if it is a union of values, we have to have respect for all beliefs in the EU, and I believe that with the Turkish membership, Turkey's outreach in the East, in the Muslim world, will be much better. But also with the Turkish integration of Muslims already in the EU will be much better, and we will be able to prevent any radicalization. So this is an important thing. And my last point, of course, we know Turkey's size, we know Turkey's difficulties, and we also know the hurdles, unfortunately, created by one or two member states in the EU in this process. But despite this, as my colleague was telling from Kosovo, today 79% of the Turkish nation is in favor of EU membership. 65% of the Turkish nation believes that Turkey can fulfill the membership criteria and can join the EU. So what we need is just equal treatment, but also we need Europeanization of enlargement policy. Please, please, please. The Commissioner Varhelyi mentioned the powers. We want the European Commission to use full powers. Because unfortunately, the enlargement process after 2004 had been too much nationalized. Of course, we can understand some nationalistic points of some of the member states. But if it is not a vital interest, if it is not in line with the EU's general interest, we should not allow this unanimity rule to block the process. And I think we need their leadership and we need their courage. So that's what I wanted to say to answer your question.
Thank you. Thank you, Farouk. And let me stress that indeed the European Union is a project based on values, and among these values there's for sure the absolute refusal of any discrimination on the basis of religion or ethnicity or gender or political beliefs. So this should not and never be an issue in my view, and also according to the treaties, I guess. Now turning to Albania. I'll give the floor to the Deputy Minister for Europe and Foreign Affairs of the Republic of Albania. I think one of the youngest, if not the youngest, in the region. We had the pleasure to meet each other already a few months ago because I have to admit I was very proud to use the College of Europe in Bruges as a stage for gathering most of you. In that case, we applied the Western Balkans principle, sorry Farouk, to have a discussion with the students about indeed the perspectives of the Future of Europe conference seen from the Western Balkans. And I remember that the students were very impressed by hearing views of a deputy foreign minister that was basically younger than the students themselves. And I think that this tells a lot also about the impulse that Albania has given to renews and reforms inside the country. And also here again, as I mentioned, for North Macedonia, I had the privilege of witnessing and following and accompanying while I was in office, one of the most impressive reforms of the justice system that could possibly be done in the region, and yet here we are still. So please, you have the floor.
Thank you, Rector Mogherini. And it's always a pleasure seeing you, the Commissioner, and of course the colleagues, ministers of the region. Please firstly allow me to thank the Bulgarian hosts for the hospitality, for their excellent organization, and also for the very relevant time, actually, in which they have chosen to have this dialogue between the EU and our broader region on the benefits of EU integration. I say relevant time because it is a discussion that has assumed a new sense of urgency in the aftermath of Russia's illegal war of aggression against Ukraine. This war has shaken our sense of peace and security. Indeed, it has shaken the very foundations of Europe's security architecture and the international rules-based order. And for us, in the Western Balkans, the war has conjured up painful memories from a recent past, when our region also offered the world horrible images of ruin and bloodshed, like those coming out of Ukraine today. But look at the Western Balkans now. I believe I do not exaggerate when I say that there is no other region in the world where the benefits of EU integration are clear for all to see. Indeed, the Western Balkans are today a showcase of what concerted European and Western engagement can achieve when there is a clear and strategic commitment and focus. The truth is that the Western Balkans managed to leave behind the terrible logic of ethnic wars and begin its transformation from a region that produced more history than it could consume into a region of peace, stability, and cooperation because of the EU integration. The EU offered the region a dream that was powerful enough to replace the calling of history. Moreover, the EU and the West backed this dream with the proper instruments and support that made it tangible and credible. One has but to look at an initiative like the Open Balkan to understand how far the region has come. Only 10, 15 years ago, any Albanian or Serb or North Macedonian politician entertaining such an idea would most probably have been branded a traitor. But here we are today, and despite the emotions it understandably brings up, and despite the hesitation by some in our region, the initiative is slowly becoming a reality. The region, or at least a significant part of the region, has borrowed a page from the history of Europe and the European Union and is trying to replicate it in the Western Balkans. Would an idea as revolutionary as this initiative have been possible without the EU integration process? I doubt it. Now, I focus on this initiative because it is one of the most emblematic symbols of the transformation of the region as a whole. But the list of achievements and advances in all countries in the region is definitely far longer. From democratic standards to institution building, from rule of law to capacity building, from the economy to the environment, from culture to education, most countries in the region have made giant strides towards building modern European cities and societies. The Western Balkans are fully aware and grateful of the benefits of integration. It seems, however, as if the EU itself, or rather a number of EU member states, have forgotten just how beneficial integration can be, and not just to the Western Balkans, but to the EU itself. In recent years, the EU has lost the focus and strategic approach that made such a difference in transforming the Western Balkans. And instead of being a strategically approached process, integration became hostage to considerations that have nothing to do with the merit-based, transformative, and strategic process it was supposed to be. In recent events, we're happy with the victory of Macron in France, but why should a merit-based integration process be conditional upon election results on which we have no bearing and whose results have never been part of our conditionalities? Or if we look at the opening of negotiations with Albania and North Macedonia, which have stalled for the past 2 years. Just try to imagine just how detrimental an impact that has had on the EU's image and credibility. What makes the situation more concerning is the fact that while the EU has lost its strategic focus, other geopolitical rivals vying for influence in the Western Balkans are very strategic in their approach. For instance, Russia and its investment in stoking tensions in the region, or China and its attempts to build economic influence in the region. How can it be that the same EU that just 10 years ago enjoyed unchallenged strategic exclusivity in the Western Balkans, all owed to the benefits of EU integration, is today satisfied with managing rival geopolitical influences in its inner courtyard? We believe that the time has come for the EU to find anew the strategic impulse that transformed the region in the late 1990s. The integration process must once again become credible and tangible for the whole region. Situations like in Bosnia and Herzegovina or Kosovo, with no free movement right in the middle of Europe, are not tenable anymore. And it is high time for Europe to remember the findings of the Amato Commission and act accordingly, because the cost of isolation is higher than that of integration. Thank you.
Thank you, Maggie. Indeed, the costs of non-integration are higher than the cost of integration. That's, I think, the core message that should come out of this panel this morning. I will now turn to Josip, the Deputy Foreign Minister of Bosnia and Herzegovina, for a view from Sarajevo, or Mostar, if I'm not mistaken, where you are.
From Bosnia and Herzegovina.
From Bosnia and Herzegovina
Yeah.
as a whole. That's,
Yes.
that's a very good way to present it.
Yes, of course.
The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Madam Mogherini. And at the very beginning, I would like to thank our organizers, the Atlantic Club and the MEP, Kuchuk, Ilhan, to gathering us all. And for us from Bosnia and Herzegovina, being in Sofia, being in Bulgaria is of somewhat very important and close to our heart, because 30 years ago, Bulgaria was first country recognizing the independence of my country and being the flag carrier for the others, to try to, by concrete deeds, support expansion of freedom, expansion of all of the values that EU today is built upon. 30 years ago, there was a very clear message coming from Bulgaria. I have heard it also this morning, Madam Minister, from you, that Bulgaria is still continuing to support territorial integrity, sovereignty of my country. But the question is why we are 30 years after proclaimed independence and acceptance by the other sovereign country are even talking about the territorial integrity of Bosnia and Herzegovina and my country. Multi-layer answer is coming from this. One of them definitely lies in the cost of not having the enlargement process sooner than we are having it later, but also a great share of responsibility lies on us within the Bosnia and Herzegovina and the international community that invested for the past 3 decades in my country, and especially after the war and aggression to Bosnia and Herzegovina, conflict that happened there, and Dayton Peace Accord that was 26 years ago. Today we have two political tendencies, I would say, in Bosnia and Herzegovina, which are the predominantly main reason why we're discussing about the territorial, or the question of the territorial integrity of Bosnia and Herzegovina, even though I think that it's not in the imminent danger, but always have to be careful, having in mind what's going on with the devastating Russian aggression to Ukraine, always to be vigilant, and that's something that we in Bosnia and Herzegovina are very serious. First one is a separatist political, I would say, agenda, which is coming from one part of the political club in the Bosnia and Herzegovina. Another one is the antidote, which is the unitaristic agenda, which is also coming from another part of the political club in Bosnia and Herzegovina. And the solution for this, or the, let's say, the cure for those two opposite political tendencies which are feeding each other, would be to respect what brought peace to my country 26 years ago, which is the simple formula from the Dayton Peace Accord. Bosnia and Herzegovina, one country with the two entities and three constitutive people and other citizens living within the country. Also, this would, stabilize the political situation and keep us trying to focus back on what is important for my country, and this is in first line regional cooperation and good neighborly relations, and second of all, this is the EU and NATO integration on equal footing. I am convinced that candidacy status for Bosnia and Herzegovina would give a breeze of fresh air, who said politically this morning, to help that the citizens of Bosnia and Herzegovina can see the palpable benefit of the integration, because after we submitted our application, Madam Mogherini, 2016, you were in office, no major integration step took in Bosnia and Herzegovina, and this is something which is really, I would say, concerning, that we have to try to meet this integration path from both ways, from Bosnia and Herzegovina side, but also from the EU side. When it comes to the NATO, we are very glad that the open door policy is more vivid, more visual or palpable for us, because North Macedonia, Montenegro, our imminent neighboring countries, dear friends, have become the full member states. So we equally believe that the enlargement, or better say, as you said, integration policy of the EU would have, in a short period of time, the equal amount of success. Because I have my doubts where the European Union can be considered credible in the global geostrategic position if it's not credible in its own kitchen garden. And Balkans, or Western Balkans as it is, the Brussels, or Southeast Europe, that I would personally prefer, what is the denomination of our region, is a kitchen garden of the European Union. And us living in this kitchen garden, we are no less Europeans by social, cultural, religion, or any other background, because we are not only the part of the political or institutionalized Europe. In order to prevent third actors that we are discussing every year on the level of the political consultations between the EU and the Southeast European countries to go deeper or to go wider in the region, we have to put the money where our mouths are, meaning that the EU, for all of us in the region, is the biggest trade partner, biggest investment partner. We have no viable alternative than to push towards the European Union, because the alternative to the EU membership is the reality in which we are living right now. I personally don't like it, and I think that the rest of my colleagues are sharing this feeling. Also, in the terms of widening the NATO umbrella, Bosnia and Herzegovina is going to take the steps closer in the cooperation towards the alliance. This is our domestic obligation. This is our domestic will, and it goes hand in hand with the EU and the NATO future of my country. Prerequisite for all of this is excellent regional cooperation that we have to put on another level for us. European regional space, something which is welcomed, and we believe that this, as the continuation of the Berlin process, should be further developed, giving the opportunity for all of us to go easier, move our businesses, our contacts and everything throughout the region. So unfortunately, with the aggression of Russia to Ukraine, this is galvanized again discussion about lost opportunities, The time is maybe the only asset that we don't have in our toolbox, and we should act now, and we should once again put the money where our mouths are and to integrate the entire region to our joint European family. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And last but not least, before we give back the floor to the Commissioner for reactions, we turn to Podgorica, that, by the way, I have always been told is the geographically closest capital to Rome. So this to give you a sense of geographical distance and how, well, no need to do this in Sofia, I guess. But this to say that even Western Europe is so close to the Balkans that we sometimes don't realize. Please, Madam Deputy Foreign Minister of Montenegro.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Rector Mogherini. Yes, it's true regarding Podgorica and Rome. Actually, we in
Apart
Montenegro...
from the Vatican and San Marino, I should mention. I'm sorry.
Okay.
National duty.
Okay, but we feel the same as well from Montenegro. I have to admit that 10 years now I've been dealing with European integration of Montenegro. That started in 2012, and since the very beginning we felt some kind of crisis. First it was financial crisis, then economic crisis, then migration crisis, then COVID crisis. Now we do have real war crisis in Europe. None of these crises did not caused by any country that are here today from our region, yet. So now it's time to prevent any possibility that we will not like it in the future period, and that is the main message I would like to send today. Now it's time for European Union and for our partners from European Union countries to make a really bold moves and to do something with the enlargement process. That was actually, enlargement was maybe the most successful politics of European Union through the time. So now we are dealing with a lot of bad things that we could not even imagine that could happen in Europe. We are dealing with war in Ukraine. My heart started missing a bit when I heard a colleague from Kiev, Olha. She was saying things regarding European integration. She was skipping to say anything about war, but we saw the tears in her eyes, and I really felt it. Now we have to say that we have to do whatever we can do to stop war in Ukraine and to prevent any other things in Europe, in the soil of Europe. None of us needed that. The only thing at this stage what Montenegro could do for Ukraine is to continue to accept the refugees from Ukraine, like we were dealing through history in Montenegro. Through the Balkan Wars, we actually had 200,000 refugees in Montenegro. That was 1/3 of our population. Now we do have something around between 600,000 and 7,000 people from Ukraine in Montenegro. That is again 1% of the whole Montenegrin population. So we can continue with this, and of course we can support Ukraine on European path. We are willing and we are ready to exchange our experience regarding the negotiating process with our Ukraine colleague when times come. Regarding Montenegro, I would like to say that membership to the EU does not have alternative. Still in Montenegro, after 10 years, people actually supporting the idea of full-fledged membership to the EU, between 75% and 80% depending on a pool. So Montenegrin people still believe, and I personally still believe in enlargement policy in our country to become a member of the EU. Now we are aware that a lot of things were happening in the previous period. We are aware that we have to do our homework as well, because we have to deal with a lot of difficult things. Now it's time for rule of law, definitely, and now it's time to unblock the process, European Union negotiating process in Montenegro. We are hoping in next couple of days we will get a new government who are going to deal with unblocking of European integration process. And we are really hoping that from your side it's going to be watched the positive, not negative signals from Montenegro, from all of our countries, because now it's time to see and to search for every single positive thing in our countries. It's not time to search and to seek for negative things. If we are searching for them, we will find them. But now it's time for positive things. One of them is definitely common foreign and security policy. Montenegro is 100% aligned with CFSP, and we have no doubt about that. When it comes to the sanctions toward Russia as well, there were no doubt at all. So we will continue to be aligned 100%. In Montenegro now, a lot of people actually support the membership to NATO as well. That was not the case before the war in Ukraine. We do have 10% more supporters to the NATO than it was before the war, so it is one of the crucial signs that future things are really, really important for all of us, and the security of the region and security of the whole Europe is really important for all of the people who live in Europe. Now it's really time for us to accelerate our path toward European Union, and we are not searching definitely for shortcuts. We are just searching for, let's say, merit-based acceleration, at least for the countries who have no doubt where they are belong, on what part of the civilization they belong, actually. That was the main messages from my country to you, to European member countries as well, and to the institutions of European Union. And now at the end, аз иска да кажа да за мен големо е удоволствие да съм тук днес с вас, уважаема госпожа министър, уважаема Гергана, колеги, ваше превъзходителство, господин Карадай, Dr. Solomon Pasi. You were right, we have made mistakes. Let's not allow to ourselves more mistakes. Thanks.
Thank you. And I think we heard very clear commitment from the region, the broad region. I think we heard very clear commitment from the President of the European Parliament. I think we heard clear words from the Minister of Bulgaria here, even if I know there are some probably steps that could be usefully taken here in Sofia. And I think we're all looking forward to unblocking the situation when it concerns the start of the negotiations with North Macedonia and Albania. And I think that there could be no better conclusion to this panel. Unfortunately, without time for opening to questions, I'm afraid. But I think the concluding words go to the Commissioner for final comments. And please, you have the floor.
I try to make it very quick. First of all, for those who are not always familiar with these discussions that we have, as I said at the beginning, this is Central and Eastern Europe after all. So we first always talk about the negativism. And you have heard quite a significant amount of frustration for different reasons from different corners. But what is very important for me, and this is something that I keep on repeating to our member states who are taking the decisions, is that we have to take every decision we can make, no matter how small it is and no matter how big it is. But when the time comes and when the conditions are met, we have to take the decisions. And there is no excuse, because if we don't take the decisions, all the negative consequences will haunt us. and not those in the Western Balkans. So I think this is a very powerful message from here. My message to the region back is maybe in the region we talk too much about the process. This IGC, that negotiating round, this candidate status, that candidate status. This is not the core issue, I think, because this will come if there is progress. If there is progress on the ground. So if reforms go ahead without being called upon all the time to deliver this and that, if it is visible enough, be it the rule of law, be it democratic principles, be it fight against organized crime, be it fight against corruption, be it economic reforms, be it social reforms, this will reach a critical mass the European Union will not be able to ignore. The other interesting message I take back is that, yes, once criteria are met, European Union should deliver. But it's not a technical exercise only. It's also a political exercise. Political exercise meaning that it's not enough to convince the Commission, you always have to convince the Member States. And I understand that this is sometimes it is a difficult and challenging task, but we are here to help. And maybe this is the part where we need to do even more than before together. Now, of course, this brings me to the comment from Faruk that the enlargement process became too much nationalized. To some extent, yes. But don't forget that when we introduced the new methodology, we have tried to make it even more objective. But we have put the rule of law reforms front and center. There is no discount. No progress in the rule of law gives you no progress anywhere else. So we need to see a progress there before we can move on elsewhere. Now, finally, I fully agree with the message, and I think this should be the concluding remark here, is that we have to work together to avoid any conflict emerging from the Western Balkans. Because it's not only the Western Balkans that will be affected directly, but also Europe, the whole of the continent. Thank you.
Thank you. And indeed, thanking all our panelists and excusing myself for not having had the ability of gaining a little bit of more time to open the floor. I think the concluding message indeed is this. The number one priority for the entire continent of Europe is to prevent further conflicts and hopefully to try and resolve the current ones, starting from the war in Ukraine and the aggression of Russia to Ukraine. And indeed, still the best way to prevent conflicts, the antidote is the European integration. And my final message to you, on the basis of what Commissioner just mentioned, is to whoever is concerned, use the power you have to avoid regretting mistakes in the future. Thank you very much, and have a good continuation of the forum.